أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're going deep, really deep into some fascinating verses. We're going to be exploring verses 133 and 134 of Surah Al-Baqarah
Okay.
from the Tafsir.
Right.
Now, just to give a little context for our listeners, these verses are all about a really profound moment
Yes.
where, as death approached Prophet Jacob,
Peace be upon him.
he has this crucial conversation with his sons
Yes.
about their future worship, what's going to happen after he's gone.
Yeah, their spiritual path after he's no longer there.
Exactly. And the Tafsir, of course, it provides that deeper layer of interpretation and explanation of the Quranic text.
Right. It illuminates these verses for us in a way that, we might not grasp on a surface level.
Right, right. And so in this deep dive, our real mission is to unpack the core message of these verses.
Yes.
What do they mean for us today? What are those key insights we can extract about faith, about lineage, and ultimately about personal responsibility?
It's a timeless message, really.
Yeah, these ancient words have so much to teach us. So, okay, let's just jump right in. We have Jacob. He's on his deathbed. What does the Tafsir tell us about what's going through his mind at this point?
It really highlights his worry, his concern, even in his final moments about his children's spiritual well-being after he's gone. He really wants them to stay on the right path,
Yeah.
to keep worshiping God alone. And it just shows his love for them, his devotion as both a prophet and a father.
Right, it's that dual role he's playing, both prophet and father.
Absolutely.
And that leads him to ask this incredibly direct personal question to his sons.
Right. Yes. He says, "What will you worship after me?"
Like, that's getting to the heart of it,
We're
right?
not beating around the bush.
Not at all.
It's a father deeply concerned about his children's future, their spiritual journey.
And they answer him, and their response is, wow, it's really powerful.
It is. They say, "We will worship your God and the God of your fathers, Abraham and Ishmael and Isaac, one God, and we are Muslims in submission to him." It's such a clear statement, a firm declaration of their faith.
Yeah, and you see that connection, right?
Yes.
To their forefathers, to Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac.
And their commitment to Islam, their submission to the one God. It's a strong statement of their belief.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting. They mentioned Ishmael.
Yes.
Ishmael was Jacob's uncle, not his father.
Right.
So how does the Tafsir explain that?
Well, it explains that this was actually a figure of speech that the Arabs use. They would sometimes use the term father to refer to an uncle. And Nahas, as quoted by Al-Qurtubi, clarifies that. So the sons, they're essentially expressing their commitment to the God of their entire ancestral lineage, including their great-grandfather Abraham, grandfather Isaac, and Jacob's brother Ishmael.
Right.
And they're using a term, father, that conveys deep respect and connection.
So it's not a mistake. It's not a historical inaccuracy. It's just a reflection of the language and the culture at the time.
Precisely. And it really highlights that strong sense of kinship, that shared religious heritage. It's a reminder that language evolves and that cultural context is essential for understanding.
Absolutely. And now the Tafsir takes a bit of a turn. And I have to say, this really surprised me. It dives into the implications of this verse for inheritance laws.
Interesting.
Right, like how do we even get there? But the Tafsir points out that Abu Bakr,
Yeah.
citing narrations from Ibn Abbas and Ibn Zubayr, recorded by al-Bukhari, he actually used this verse as evidence for a grandfather being considered like a father in inheritance.
Okay, so like in certain situations, the grandfather would take precedence over, say, the deceased person's brothers.
Exactly. And al-Bukhari even mentions that he didn't know of any opposing opinions on this point at the time. So it's like these verses weren't just abstract ideas.
Yeah, they had real-world applications.
They informed legal interpretations. It's fascinating.
It is. And the Tafsir goes on to list other prominent scholars who shared this opinion. Aisha, Al-Hasan al-Basri, Tawus, Atta, Malik, and Ashafi. It really shows how much weight this view carried.
Right, like it wasn't just a fringe idea, it was a serious legal interpretation.
Absolutely.
But as often happens in these types of scholarly discussions, there's another perspective to consider.
Right. There's always another side to the story.
Exactly. And so the Tafsir tells us that Ahmad, he held a different view.
Okay.
He proposed that the inheritance should be divided between the grandfather and the brothers. And this was also reportedly the opinion of some very influential early figures, including Umar, Uthman, Ali, Ibn Masud, Zayd bin Thabit, and a number of other scholars. So on one hand, you have Abu Bakr and those who agree with him, seeing the grandfather as stepping into the father's shoes, so to speak. And then you have Ad and others who argued for a more direct distribution, including the brothers.
So two different approaches to understanding the verse in situations.
Right. So for our listener, why is this discussion about inheritance laws even important to understand these verses? What does it tell us?
Well, I think it shows us just how complex and multi-layered interpreting religious text can be. These verses might seem straightforward at first glance,
Right.
but they can have these profound implications for practical aspects of life. And you can have these different scholarly interpretations, even on fundamental matters.
Right. It shows the richness, the dynamism of Islamic jurisprudence.
It's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Right. And these texts, they've been studied, debated, interpreted for centuries.
Those ongoing conversations.
Exactly. Okay, let's get back to the core message within the Son's declaration, where they emphasize one God and their submission to him as Muslims. What do these phrases really mean?
Well, the Tafsir explains that one God signifies the absolute oneness of God, rejecting any partnerships or associations, any other deities. It's the cornerstone of Islamic monotheism.
The singularity of the divine.
Yes. And Muslims, in this context, means those who are completely obedient and submissive to God.
It's that surrendering to the will of God.
Exactly. And the Tafsir brings in a verse from the Quran to emphasize this, verse 3.83.
Okay.
It says that everything in the heavens and the earth has submitted to God, willingly or unwillingly, and they will all return to him.
So submission is presented as this universal principle embedded within all creation.
Yes, not just something new or unique to a particular group.
And the Tafsir takes this a step further, talking about the religion of all the prophets.
Right. It argues that Islam, in its essence of submission to the one God, has always been the underlying religion of all the prophets, even if the specific laws and practices varied.
That's a powerful statement.
It is. It suggests this shared spiritual core, this unity across different prophets and their messages.
And there's a verse from the Quran that really drives this point home.
Quran 21.25 says, "And we did not send any messenger before you, O Muhammad, but we revealed to him, saying, La ilaha illa ana, none has the right to be worshipped but I, Allah, so worship me alone and none else."
It's that consistent message of monotheism throughout history.
Yes, sent to all the prophets.
And there's a hadith that illustrates this beautifully, simply.
The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "We, the prophets, are brothers with different mothers, but the same religion."
It's such a clear analogy.
It is. It's like saying they all share the same core belief, like brothers from the same father, but their specific laws and practices might vary, like having different mothers.
It's the spiritual DNA being the same, even with variations in expression.
Yeah.
Now let's shift to the second verse, verse 134. It says, "That was a nation who has passed away. They shall receive the reward of what they earned, and you of what you earn. And you will not be asked about what they used to do." What's the big takeaway here?
I think this verse is all about personal responsibility and accountability in faith. The Tafsir makes it clear that just because your ancestors were righteous, even prophets like Jacob, that doesn't automatically guarantee you a place in the hereafter.
You have to do your part.
Exactly. You have to have your own good deeds, your own sincere practice.
They're judged for their actions, and you're judged for yours.
It's a very clear separation.
And the Tafsir says it plainly. They have their deeds, and you have yours.
It's a stark reminder that we can't just coast on the piety of our family.
And to really drive that point home, there's another hadith.
It says, "Whoever was slowed on account of his deeds will not get any faster on account of his family lineage."
Wow.
It's powerful. Our progress in faith is determined by our own actions, not our family background.
So for our listeners, this is a very personal message. It's about owning your faith.
Yes.
It's not inherited. It's not a guarantee. You have to cultivate it yourself.
Absolutely. While a righteous lineage can be a blessing and an inspiration, it doesn't replace your own individual responsibility before God. It's so true. Okay, let's wrap up this deep dive. What are the key points you want our listener to take away?
Well, first, the unwavering monotheism of Prophet Jacob and his sons, that commitment to the one God.
Right.
Second, that interesting linguistic point about Ishmael being referred to as a father, reminding us of the importance of context.
Yes, context is key.
Then, that unexpected connection to inheritance laws, showing how these verses can have practical implications.
Even that there can be different interpretations.
Lastly, and I think most importantly, that individual responsibility in our faith journey.
Beautifully summarized. And as we end, I urge you, our listener, to consider these ancient words and how they still speak to us today. They remind us that faith is personal. It's about our own choices, our own actions, regardless of our background.
A powerful message to reflect on.